Alright, hey everybody. In this video, I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things. I'm going to further talk about the things that I mentioned in the previous video, where I'm still kind of just trying to figure out what I want to do next and, the further direction of everything and stuff like that. And there's actually there's a lot of details, and I'm probably going to forget something in this video. One of the things that you're looking at right now is I have actually began fleshing out at least the rudiments of the next, content patch for Revulsion. Now, keep in mind, everything that I'm doing right now is still up in the air. I don't really know for sure exactly what direction I'm going to do, what direction I'm going to go with just yet. But I'm kind of leaning in the direction of at least getting something laid out so that I can take a look at it and kind of get an idea of what I'll be doing. But there's a lot of other stuff too. I want to go over some. I want to go over some feedback and talk about some of the things that have been said. I should probably avoid doing these kinds of responses because my inflections. I always worry that it sounds like I'm being defensive because people are probably really used to that. I'm not really I'm not being defensive. Sometimes when I say shit, I just sort of brain dump and just ends up on it's stupid. I should be careful about that kind of stuff. I don't think that that's necessarily the case here, and who knows, whatever. But uh, Orchid 9 here has some really interesting information that is definitely worth going over and just taking in for a second. And you move to full release with the default UI. What do you expect? I mean, I pretty much yeah. I know I'm getting what I'm expecting. It's within reason. Just an example that the presentation is lacking. Revulsion still looks amateurish, like an alpha version. Yeah, probably. I mean, it looks that way, but yeah. Gameplay and content is what people are who already bought will appreciate. This is true, although it'll help a little bit, at least with the reviews of the game, where I have somebody say something like, "It's only worth $5 because it doesn't have enough stuff in it." You know what I mean? Like, but also too, there's another aspect here as well. I'm practicing. I'm trying to sharpen my abilities, and I'm trying to find something that works that is harder to do than just like coming up with a design and on paper. I'm trying to find some kind of a niche in terms of um, a practical development style that I can continue to, I guess, milk would be a good word, or continue to extrapolate from as a base, as a foundation. So there's a little bit more going on here than just, hey, I want to generate the perfect game right off the bat, but I'm really searching. I'm I don't feel like I've reached the point yet. I feel like the gameplay of Revulsion is done, but I don't feel like I've reached this, the right niche. I don't feel like I've reached the right thing. And I think that one of the things about that, honestly, is that I went in the random generation direction in terms of, like maybe that was a good way to go. And it turns out that people kind of hated that, right? Like they didn't like that at all. But for me, it was more fun because I was able to play the game on the same level as the people who have never played the game before themselves, right? So like I was immediately like, yeah, this is so much more fun because I was getting a chance to experience the game in a way where I didn't create every single nook and cranny and understood exactly. Because when I'm playtesting my own stuff, I'll have gone through it at least 100 times. If I have a little bit of random generation, then it just makes it all the more interesting for me. But there's actually a lot more to talk about in regards to that as well, and I'll go into this a little bit more detail as I kind of um, just to talk more in general. And post-launch support is important for properly launched games. I guess Revulsion wasn't properly launched. I don't know. I feel like the game is there. This is the game. This is the meat of the game as it stands right now, pending some further insight, some further, feeling things out. Like, for example, let me explain it in a little bit easier to understand tangible way. Right now, since everybody disliked the random generation stuff, I'm swinging. I'm gonna try and see what happens if I swing in the opposite direction and just go full fucking Dark Souls, like open endedness, like level design. So like for a really really basic example, this over here is going to be a doorway that leads to another level that is sort of like, that will interconnect and maybe will come back into this level with another doorway over here. When you first come into this area, you'll be sort of like overlooking, and there's like a wall here. There's two buildings, and then you'll see a tower in the far distance, and then you'll just see like structures in the distance, which are the other levels. So very much in this vein of Dark Souls, I'm basically saying, hey, this is a bigger open level where you can kind of go through, and there's really nothing preventing you from taking a wrong turn or going. So for example, you can come down this way. If you go here, right, and into this section here, you'll run into, there'll be like a much higher level abomination that you can't even try to get past him because he's too powerful for a starting player, right? So like a lot of players will like, see that and they'll be like, oh shit, there's like a level 50 fucking abomination. How the fuck am I gonna do? How am I supposed to get around that? So they end up going back around this way, and they kind of come down here, and there's like, oh, there's a little nook over here, and it's like he looks up that way. There's loot up there. Like the monsters are still somewhat, something that you can deal with. It's that very much that kind of flow to it where the player is sort of figuring out this sort of larger interconnected sort of thing where you're collecting loot. Maybe there's a lot more blueprints that are just sort of sprinkled around. So like if you go up this way, you can get that one-time item. Very, very Souls. Very, very Souls-like. And that's a very different style of flow from what's already in the game right now. Now, if this ends up sticking, if this ends up being something where I get something like this out, and I release it in tandem with what's already in the game now, and I get a better response, then that'll have a big influence on where I decide to go next. Like, I can try to just go next with some kind of, like basic, I don't know. I could try to go next with just come up with a new design and then and see how that works. I'm not really. I don't like writing stuff down on paper and saying this is the design of the game. You know what I mean? I'm not a GDD kind of a person. I'm more like a organic. Let's build it, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it sucks. Kind of a person, right? I believe in progress through iteration and not progress through coming up with some. So I feel partially like just coming up with another game design because the last one didn't do well. It's like throwing darts at a dartboard, right? I wanna I wanna try and stick with the same dartboard for a little while and see if I can continue a few different ideas, if that makes any sense. Progress through iteration is my mantra. That is how I feel on all of this. So when it comes to this, like giving it a proper design, a proper release and stuff like that, that's not quite how I'm seeing things. I'm kind of seeing things in like, here's what it is. Like, sure, the UI could be better. Sure, this and that. But like, I'm not getting the response on the level design that I want. I don't feel like I'm getting I don't feel like the important stuff is there yet. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You could rework it in a proper game, call it Redux, multi-platform release. Sure, fix the UI, but like, if I do that without doing these steps first, then how am I gonna really like? It's just gonna be a lukewarm response, and also I don't know how in the world I would even make the connections to get a multi-platform release. Also, the game's like development art development pipeline and stuff like that would probably change depending on like consoles, because consoles are like, I don't know, it would be a little weird. That's a lot of work for one dude. I'm really more. I want the game design part. I want the game design part to be the thing that really sets this forward. Not so much the, hey, I'm pretending to be a corporation or a corporate entity trying to, make money. It's more like a, this is just something I want to do kind of a thing. I want to find that. I want to find something. I'm not there yet. I haven't found it yet. This is a little different. Uh, or you might rather pull the plug and start with a new game, which would be easier. No, because I would just be starting over, and I'd end up back at square one, where I didn't quite figure out exactly what I was doing. Like if I jump right into Revulsion 2 right now, I'll be thinking to myself, well, am I going in the right direction? Because like, should I just stick to what I was already doing, or yeah. The only thing is like there's a lot of other stuff to consider. Yeah, which will also guarantee that it wouldn't be, better after years of work. I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I don't have an answer. The only thing I do know is that I haven't quite I'm not quite happy with the responses of Revulsion yet. I don't know. I'm not quite there yet. I'm not expecting the game to suddenly sell millions of copies or something, but I'm not quite there yet. There's something missing. Anyway, I said that like 20 times. Um, but there are aspects that I do need to consider. For example, Revulsion 2. All right, yes, it would be a lot easier to jump right into Revulsion 2 in some respects, but it would also be a multiplayer game. Now, here's one of the interesting things about doing a multiplayer thing if I go the route of these sort of semi-open-ended levels. If it's a multiplayer game, then you have to kind of do things a little bit like multiplayer in Dark Souls, where when you play with a friend, you're actually invading their game and you're just sort of there. And in Dark Souls, there's some problems with that where it's like you get kind of locked into the same world, and you know what I mean. And you gotta try and like complete it together, and stuff gets. It's a little weirder. It's a little weirder. I think I can kind of avoid a lot of that problem, but it's not going to be that same like really cohesive multiplayer experience you get with something like Warframe, or Destiny, where you get with your friends, and then you just play together. I'd probably end up going more along the lines of like the Borderlands route, where it's you have these sort of levels, um, and then like one player can run up to one of the doors, and it'll be like waiting for other players or something like that before the door actually opens, and then you can go into the next area. It would have to be something along those lines, which is not entirely that crazy either. But would it be better to do that than to just go full out Destiny Warframe? But there's a lot to talk about on that front. I've already talked too much about just this. It's been 13 minutes of me talking about just this. Okay, so there's some other stuff too. If I go right into Revulsion 2, I can retweak the entire art style, right? Well, the level design that I'm building with here is different because I'm building the level as a continuous mesh, and my goal is to build the entire layout for the entire world. And I usually start off with the floors just so that I can sort of jot down, generally speaking, where things are going to be happening, what's going to be the general shape of all the areas. Like like in the final product, all these like blank spaces here would be walls and details, and this would be a staircase going down, and like you'd be kind of going up here. You'd see that there's a ledge up there. You'd see the tower in the distance. You'd come down. There'd be maybe some monsters hiding down here. This would have like rubble and shit on it, so that it's not just a completely straight shot. Maybe maybe a couple, tougher enemies, coming up this way, and like, what I mean. You can kind of, for me, this gives me a lot of information on the general flow of what I'd be dealing with this kind of level, had I done this. Now this is a big open ravine, and there's lava down there, and this over here is like a door that requires a red key card, for example. I don't know. It's not set in stone, but this is a door that requires a red key card, and the only way to go down into the ravine down below without dying, or into the lower parts where there's just like a different area where it's sort of underneath and there's like lava everywhere and stuff like that, you'd have to go through a giant chunk, maybe two or three other levels, and eventually find the red key card. And then on the map, you would see that there's, there would be markers for all the doors that you haven't opened yet that are red key card doors and stuff like that, right? So like you'd end up having to kind of, it would end up sort of forcing you to kind of go a little bit like in a linear path, kind of. But then there would be all kinds of side paths and side areas and things where you can go and you can see things and you can get loot if you fully explore it. And if you remember that there's a door like that right there, um, it'll end up leading you back this way anyway. You know what I mean? So it'll lead you through it in a sort of linear path, but it's still like this very, um, it's still not, it's still a lot more, there's a lot more paths. It's a lot more organic. Now I have a feeling that this style of design would get a much different response because first of all, nobody else is doing it. Uh, it would literally place the game as being a Souls-like at that point, right? I've already said this like a bunch of times before in the past, but yeah. So, but at the same time, I have to be careful because I'm developing it with a different art pipeline. So these levels are going to be a lot. Probably, I'm going to have to be careful that these levels don't end up looking different from the levels that are already in the game. So I have to kind of try and use the same assets. I have to try and keep it within reason, so that it doesn't clash too much with the other levels, right? So that kind of like holds me back. It kind of limits me, right? Now, on this right here, this is beautiful right here. I mean, um, I guess your name's Clortse. Clortse. Well, honestly, Revulsion 2 but with Quake style texturing and monster design, right? Like, absolutely. One of the things that's actually kind of interesting is that I've learned enough about Blender. I've learned enough about pixel art that I could probably get to that level where I'm doing something that looks an awful lot like this. All right, so this was posted here, and this is just like here. Let me put this down to normal speed, and like these like look at that. And this is also a level that's sort of designed in sort of this sort of same sense as well, where there's lots of secrets all over the place, and this is a lot more densely packed than I would try to do. I would be separating things a lot more. There would be a lot more. Um, you'd be doing a little bit more walking to get to each area, but the general premise, the art style, like something that's a lot like Quake 1 would be very doable. I think at this point in time, I think I can manage making making stuff that actually looks like this. And if Revulsion 2 looked like Quake 1, I don't think anyone would really complain, right? Like, honestly, it even has like the floating gun on the bottom of the screen and stuff like that. But I'd have to do things a bit differently. But like a looter shooter version of this would be pretty sweet. And if it was all like open-ended levels, I think that people would appreciate it more. But I don't know. Maybe there could be like side infinite dungeons or something where people can play together and just run the dungeons. Maybe it could have both. It would have to have both, wouldn't it? Like if it's multiplayer, right? It would have to have both, right? I'm thinking that it would. Like, there's no way around it. I'm going to have both random gen and handcrafted stuff. But the handcrafted stuff should be, like, as intricate and far-reaching as possible. It should be it should be a lot like this. It should be the exact opposite of any random generation, I think. So, with that said, um, there is actually some interesting stuff about that. Like, or you could just be a Chad and go with the cryptocurrency RPG because you know people would buy into that hard. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. There's actually, but there's actually something to be said about this a little bit more. Okay. So I am now starting to get into smart contract development. Right now, I'm just getting started, and there's this program called EOS Studio, which makes the process of developing smart contracts a lot easier. Now, I haven't actually published a smart contract yet, but the basics are here. I'm not horrible at basic C++, so, and a lot of the stuff that I need to do isn't really that hard to do. But a full-blown, RPG would probably be a really difficult task to actually make that work because it would be fully on chain and there would be a lot of interesting aspects of that. But I've already had to do a lot of thinking, a lot of really, delving into this. By the way, anyone who is following me right now, and I should probably have made this clearer earlier in the video. If any support that I get at this point in time is going to help me develop further with the EOS blockchain at this point in time. I am not kidding. If you are at all someone who isn't, a whale or an entrepreneur on the or somebody, an advocate of cryptocurrency and what it can actually do as far as smart contracts and stuff, if you are, then you probably want to try and support me because I am doing this. This is actually a thing, and I'm taking it pretty seriously. And even no matter what happens, it's probably going to end up going this way. I'm probably one of the only actual game developer, people with game development experience in this space right now. I know that there probably are some others that are messing around with things or whatever, but I have a pretty strong sense of exactly what would work with this space and how I would structure things and how I would be able to make fun content on this. And this is actually an interesting aspect to me because you don't necessarily just have to do an RPG with this. One of the things that's interesting about this is that it's entirely possible that I could start thinking about doing Revulsion 2 as a game that requires, that allows you to save your character information on the blockchain and allows you to like collect items and loot and stuff like that utilizing smart contracts. And that would make it so that it's possible to have an infrastructure for a first-person shooter that doesn't require a trusted third party, that I believe doesn't require a trusted third party, that allows me to have the same sort of infrastructure as something exactly like Destiny or Warframe, whereas I'm just an indie developer making like a Quake 1 looking, first-person shooter with multiplayer support, and it also has the infrastructure of the entire EOS blockchain behind it. So you would get a gun, and that gun would be like stored on the blockchain, and that would be like your loot, and you can sell it and do whatever the hell you want with it. I won't really have any, and that'll be how I actually make money. But there are issues regarding that actually. So there are three different ways that a developer can make a blockchain-based game work, right? So these are the three different ways, right? The first way, that's the easiest, 100% on-chain. So 100%, right? On-chain. And then you got a hybrid, right? I don't even want to type H. You got the hybrid, right? And then you have the traditional, and this is like dedicated servers, right? Well, in this case, so you have the player down here, right? Now, if this is the blockchain right here, if you do the dedicated server thing, then the player has to talk to the dedicated server, and then the dedicated server determines what is the one. This guy right here is the only one who can run the smart contracts. This defeats the entire point, in my opinion. I've already argued with people about this a lot, and if you know what I mean, like if you eliminate the direct communication with the blockchain and the player has, then if I run out of money, then I can't afford to keep the servers up, then the game dies. There's a lot of stuff. There's like a ton of things. This dedicated server structure completely defeats everything. Now, there is a hybrid method, and then there is a 100% on-chain method. Okay. Now, the 100% on-chain method means that all the client does is act like a dumb terminal, basically. I run the commands and the blockchain does everything, right? And there's a lot more overload, but that RPG that I keep talking about in my other videos is just like this. Is like literally all you do is you just make a list of commands that you want to feed the blockchain, and then those commands are fed in a single transaction, and then the basically when you feed the command in, it takes those commands right here, and then it runs its logic, and then it writes to the blockchain, and then the game is told that the blockchain is updated, and then everything gets updated, and you can see all the new stuff that just happened. So like you attacked the monster had 100 health, you did 95 damage, he only has 5 health left. After all of the stuff on here during the smart contract is run, that's where you end up, right? And 100% on chain is fairly straightforward, but it's also a lot more. It's a lot more of this, right? Which is a much harder thing for me to do because I'm not a super great C++ programmer, but I do know how to do it, right? So I have this as a method right here, right? And then there's the hybrid. Now the hybrid's a lot different. Now I've asked people about this endlessly, and I can't get a straight answer because nobody understands what the fuck I'm talking about, and it's driving me crazy. So basically, I don't want to have a dedicated server. I want to avoid a trusted third party. I mean, I'm not against doing it this way, but if I can, I want to avoid this because what's the point, right? Like, maybe it's kind of neat. I don't know. All right. Doing this hybrid method, basically the client has an algorithm on it that generates a number, you know, for special actions that you do, right? And this algorithm is hard to crack. It just sends it a code, and since the since I can't, since I'm not open sourcing the game code, nobody will be able to know what that algorithm actually is. And I can take a lot of different things and I can multiply them and divide them and make it really confusing and hard to really figure out exactly what these numbers are, right? So see, the problem with this method is that if I don't have some kind of a system in place, I can't guarantee that players are actually even going to play the game. They're just going to sit there with their wallet feeding it commands with a bot or something, and they may not even be actually playing the game. So I need a way where the client has some kind of a system where it's like, yo, dude, you're actually doing stuff. You killed the monster, and finish the quest, right? But in code, that'll end up coming out, being spit out as a crazy number, right? And that crazy number is like a password, and it's hidden within the code how that code actually works. But once you feed it to the blockchain is able to decipher it because the blockchain has the way to to decipher that code, right? And what this does is it makes it so that unless you can crack this algorithm on the client, which is totally possible, but unless you can actually break this code, the algorithm, you won't really be able to run any of the smart contracts. So you won't be able to do the things where you're getting my wallet to say hi back to your wallet, which is exactly what this does. This says, this is somebody with a wallet can say hello to my wallet, and my wallet will say hello back, basically. It's basically a hello world, right? But just imagine it being a lot more complex than that, where it's like I feed it a number, it goes through the math, and it figures out using some kind of like a um, what's the term? A checksum. It runs a checksum algorithm, gets the number, deciphers exactly what's being told, and then it runs the code. It runs the logic and does all that, right? Now, the problem with this, well, the advantage of this method is that not I can do a lot of the stuff here. Really, all it needs to do is determine whether or not the checksum, does the checksum check out, and I can have all kinds of like little hooks and things that change the number based on different factors. It'd be a real pain in the ass to crack this. I'm pretty sure somebody can do it, but it would just be a real pain in the ass. There's no need for a trusted third party, but I can be like I could do all kinds of weird stuff. Now the problem with this is that every time you go to talk to the blockchain to feed it one of these checksums, it costs a little bit of resources on your wallet, right? So you have to have a certain amount of the coin staked to your wallet, and it kind of costs a little bit of money, but like it can cost a lot of money actually. But it can work in such a way where I don't really have to do a huge amount of C++ work, this kind of stuff here, and most of the logic is just sort of set up. It's actually easier to do that. Like I can actually see myself doing this method much sooner and much easier, and it would work with a game like Revulsion 2, Revulsion 1, even. I've even considered the idea of making maybe like a promotional thing with Revulsion 1 utilizing this method, where if you do log into the game with your wallet and play through it, you can get like bonuses, and you can get items that you know what I mean, like you can get like some kind of like promotional material for Revulsion 2, right? And it's mostly just an experiment to see, all right, how well this is going to work. Maybe it's just an experiment that just shows. And in fact, even if all I do is just use this as a method to see if it works, to see if anyone can hack it, to see if it's, easily cracked, blah blah blah. I can use this as a test bed as well. So there's actually room to be, where I can actually consider doing this kind of a thing with Revulsion 1. What does this get me? Well, for starters, this makes this the first person. This is the first time a first person shooter ever utilizes this technology in the history of humanity. This is it. You're looking at it, right? And there's that. So like one of the biggest things, and I've kind of talked about this a lot too in the past, or at least even here, is that one of the things that's really holding Revulsion back is mostly just a lack of marketing. It may look rough, but it plays pretty well for what it is, and all that, right? Well, compared to this space, it's the only first-person shooter ever made in this space. So if I start to delve into this space, then even if it's just an experiment at this point in time, it's getting my feet wet. It's getting started. It's getting the gears churning for something that could be much bigger, within reason down the road, right? Not that far from now. And that ends up actually making a lot of sense. Like, maybe this could be the promotional material that I actually need. Because now I'll actually have people, the crypto space is so in dire need of something tangible. And there are very few actually tangible things that somebody can grasp onto and say, well, hey, look, here's something that I can do, you know, or that I can do that actually can affect things like people being able to post, uh, on a message board and stuff like that. Like, a lot of people don't even realize that that kind of stuff is part of the smart contract territory, which is a huge part of cryptocurrency, right? So like being able to say like, I don't know, just talk to people on a message board, right? So here we have people, these are all posts where the post itself, the content of each of these posts is stored on the blockchain, right? So like you can see Revulsion 2, and this is a link to one of my videos, right? New patch knows, like, this is actually stored as a transaction on the EOS blockchain at this point in time, right? Now there are a lot of other blockchains too, but I don't even need to worry about that right now. So that right there could be really interesting. So there are just a lot of advantages. There's a lot of things. There's something here. Let me just put it that way. I feel like there's something here that can be worked. And with that said, if I do ever, if the game does actually end up making money, or if I do end up starting to see things, then yeah, like, I'm totally up for revising the UI and stuff like that. I just don't see that as being the thing that's really doing me in right now. But also too, there's more room to explore. There's something else going on here. This isn't just one game. I don't think that's actually the case. I think this is just the start. I think this is the start of something new. I think this is just beginning. You know what I mean? I think that there's a hell of a lot more going on. And here too is like, I get it. It's like, this looks awesome. Surprised you have so few subs. Like, with the EOS RPG video, right? Like, I show this off, right? So utilizing the hybrid method, which this might work, might not work. I've tried to ask people if there's like some major problems with this. I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna keep trying. I'm gonna try and get people who are experienced with this stuff, because every time I ask this question, I'll either get someone answers the question by saying, "Why would you want to do that in the first place?" It's like, shut up, blowhard, just go away. And two, um, I'll get the I'll get some kind of weird answer like, well, if it works this way, then it would have already been figured out before, or something. It's like, who figured it out? Are we depending on them or something? What is there a they that I need to be? Bitch, I'm trying to do this now. I'm not sitting here waiting for somebody else to do it. Jesus Christ, it's like, how are we ever going to advance if we're just going to be waiting for somebody else to answer the question? And it's not even that hard of a question. Like, can somebody crack the algorithm easily just by, I don't know, decompiling the client or something? I don't know. I don't think that's actually the case. I think it's actually a total pain in the ass. And at any point in time where I start to feel like maybe there might be some kind of a thing, I just change the algorithm slightly. It's the same thing. All you need to do, release a new client, boom, and you're done. Like, it's not exactly like it's going to be some crazy thing. Well, I guess they'll just crack it again. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. If that's the case, then the hybrid method is not usable. Well, it's better to figure that out sooner than later, right? Otherwise, I think that this could actually work. Now, in terms of the game design itself, regarding all of this, so um, I am fairly certain that I know how to get the multiplayer to work with a semi-open-ended world sort of experience, right? And that can work a lot like Borderlands, but traveling between traveling between levels would be sort of like a permission thing. Everybody has to stand by the door, waits 4 seconds, and then blah, something like that. That's definitely doable. It's also doable to have randomly generated world that pretty much follows in exactly the same vein as something like Destiny or Warframe, where you just run through with your friends through randomly generated, or not totally randomly, like tiles, kind of like Warframe. I'm thinking exactly like Warframe actually, where you just have giant tiles and they're rotated and they're snapped together exactly, and you just have people like play through them over and over and over again, just grinding nonstop, right? And that's definitely that's definitely possible. Now, the issues regarding all of that is that I'd have to be careful on how I structure things. Like the game, like what gets saved on the blockchain has to be simplified a bit because I every time you communicate with the blockchain, it costs resources, right? And then you would end up with sort of a I don't know. And then you end up with sort of like a it would end up sort of changing things because like in Revulsion right now, like you have like all of these inventory slots, and I can carry like tons of shit. Like, but if it was a blockchain based type thing utilizing this checksum mathematical algorithm, um, it's possible that I'd have to like reduce that kind of loot thing down to something that's a little bit more manageable so that when it communicates between so like one of the things that like for example Anthem will do is when you're playing you get loot that's like you acquired a common item, you acquired a masterwork item or something like that, right? i'd have to I'd have to kind of go more in that direction because I don't want to have to constantly um, sit there bombarding the blockchain every single time you pick up a piece of loot or loot a treasure chest or something. So the way things would have to be structured would be fairly different, like when you actually obtain your loot and how you gain it and stuff like that. Now this is strictly for Revulsion 2, right? If I was to go full in this direction, utilizing the checksum algorithm combined with multiplayer, it would have to it would have to um it would I would have to change the way you get loot and stuff like that so that that's like you obtain 4 common items so that when you end the mission those 4 common items become you do one transaction and those 4 common items become like a pistol, a piece of body armor. You know what I mean? Like, and then at the end of the mission, that then like, okay, I got all this stuff. Like, it all has to be deciphered at that one point in time after the mission is complete or after you come back to Sanctuary or something like that. I'd have to structure things a little bit differently on that front. All right, so I think I've gone for a while. This is a 43-minute video, but there was definitely a lot to say, and I think I'm probably going to make a shorter video where I just sort of blow through this a little bit more quickly because there was just so much to say like regarding all this. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna end this now, and I'll figure out maybe faster way to communicate this. Um, I don't know if that's possible, but I hope you guys are paying attention because I wanna get feedback on this. Like I want to know what people are thinking. But that's my 2 cents so far.